Today, I'll be taking on a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Emerald Seaglass, a ROM hack created by Nemo622 that reimagines the Hoenn region of Pokemon Emerald as a throwback to the Game Boy Color era of Pokemon games. Along with redone sprite work, it also comes with the various quality of life upgrades and features seen in later games in the series. This includes the physical special split, the fairy type, and various moves, items, and abilities that originated in the later generations. It also comes with an expanded Pokédex that not only includes all the Pokemon from Gens 1 through 3, but also their later gen evolutions and a few extras thrown in there as well. There's also new minigames, updated trainer teams, buffs to certain Pokemon that help make them more viable, and much more. Put that all in a blender, and you end up with a fresh experience that feels both new and nostalgic at the same time. So as a reminder, on top of having to permanently box a Pokemon after they faint, I'm only allowed to catch one Pokemon per area of the game, I have to play on set mode, I won't be allowed to use healing items in battle, and I cannot level my Pokemon past the level of a boss trainer's ace. I'll be playing through semi-blind, limiting my knowledge to just the level caps and team lineups. Everything else I'll be discovering for myself for the first time. We start as we usually do, by picking one of the 3 Hoenn starters. I go ahead and pick Torchic, who ends up being a female. I don't know if the gender ratio for the starters was changed in this hack, but it kinda throws me in for a loop since I already had a nickname picked out. Screw it. Welcome to the team, Ellawood. I find out that Torchic has been given the Defiant ability in this hack, which sharply raises her attack whenever any of her stats are lowered. And with a workable Brave nature, I'm pretty excited to see what she can do. And after our fight against May, we can begin assembling our starting team. Lowen the Zigzagoon on Route 101, Marcus the Weedle on Route 103, Rebecca the Sunkern on Route 102, then Lynn the Poliwag on Route 104. We then make our way through the Petalburg Woods, where I catch Sarah the Shroomish along the way. Then at the flower shop at the exit, we can now buy nature-changing mints, which gives us a convenient way of maximizing our team's potential. I go ahead and buy some, including an adamant mint that I immediately use on Ellawood. After Marcus fully evolves into Beedrill, we can finally arrive at Rustboro City, where in a newly added patch of grass, I can find a Talo, who I named Guy. Before I take on Roxanne for our first gym badge, I go ahead and head north to Route 116, where I can find Matthew the Apom, then Florina the Metatite in the Rustdrift Tunnel. Matthew ends up coming with the pickup ability, which means we lose out on the much better Technician, but then Matthew ends up finding a Sunstone almost immediately, and I just so happen to have a Pokemon that can evolve with it. So Rebecca quickly evolves into Sunflora, who ends up gaining the Fire type along with a slight boost to its special attack, making it a much more useful Pokemon overall. That said, her new Fire typing actually adds a bit of a hitch to my plan to take on Roxanne's Rock types, but luckily I have a few more other options to make use of. Roxanne now has the Hoenn fossils added to her team, starting with Anorith, who easily gets taken down with a couple water guns from Lynn. Next is Lileep, who I was hoping would go for some kind of grass attack as I switched to Marcus, but it ends up going for a super effective Rock Tomb instead, bringing him close to half HP and getting the speed drop. Despite that, Marcus still outspeeds on the next turn to land a strong Bug Bite, which just barely doesn't get the KO. This means Lileep can connect with another Rock Tomb, but Marcus manages to hang on with just 6 HP. While Roxanne uses her potion, Marcus is safe to stay in and land another Bug Bite to take Lileep down. Last is Erase Nosepass, so I switch to Sarah, who ends up having to take 2 Rock Tombs before missing a Stunt Spore. She heals with an Oranberry, but since Nosepass isn't exactly a physical powerhouse, Sarah can stay in and spam Mega Drain to keep up with the damage. Eventually Nosepass heals with their held Oranberry, but after Roxanne uses her last potion, Sarah's Mega Drains continue to keep her healthy and eventually take Nosepass down, winning us our first badge of the run. Afterwards, Ellawood evolves into Combuskin, and with a Cut HM in hand, I can return to Little Root Town to access the new patch of grass. There I run into Priscilla the Mareep, who can immediately evolve to Flaffy, then after hitching around on Mr. Briny's boat, we arrive in Dewford Town, which now has a sandy area where we can find another encounter. I end up finding a Trapinch who I name Kent, then after catching Urk the Growlithe on Route 106, I temporarily put Kent in the box, and instead I add Guy to the team to use the tried and tested Guts Taylor strategy to take on Brawly and his fighting types. I enter the battle with Guy pre-poisoned, which gives him a major power boost, enough to take out Makuhita with a single wing attack. But despite being quite effective, Brawly's new Heracross manages to just barely survive on a sliver. Now our little guy has to somehow survive an arm thrust, but lucky for us, it only manages to hit twice. And since Heracross's Citrus Berry ends up recovering enough health to prevent Brawly from healing, Guy can fight back and finish it off, then with a final wing attack easily take down Metatite as well. With that, Guy fulfills his one purpose by single-handedly earning us our second gym badge. On the way to Mauville City, I grab Isadora the Sableye in Granite Cave, who comes with the Awful Stall ability. Not only that, she also has a speed-boosting Timid nature, as if to rub it in our faces just how bad Sableye usually is. I then grab the old rod and fish up Dorcas the Magikarp and Will the Tentacool. Then on Route 110 I can find Geitz the Gulpin. Then back in Slateport City, this guy with the Pelipper can take you to Pacific Locktown much earlier than usual. There you can find another new patch of grass, which is where I run into a Scyther, who I end up naming Carol, the perfect bug type to eventually replace Marcus. Then after a fairly easy fight against May, we finally arrive in Mauville City, and before we take on Wattson, I make a trip to Route 117 where I can find an Elekid named Barter. Then after feeding Kent a Jolly Mint to get rid of his modest nature, I get a neat little surprise, as Trapinch now evolves early into Vibrava at level 22. Just like that, a fight I was a bit nervous about has suddenly gotten a lot easier. I start him off against Watson's Volbeat, who was given the electric typing here, but instead of targeting its bug type with a Rock Slide, I misclick and use Dig instead. That means Volbeat can initially survive and connect with an infestation before eventually going down the following turn. His Ace Manectric comes out next, and after it doubles its attack with a couple of howls, a Dig manages to bring him into the red. It then connects with a boosted Quick Attack that brings Kent below half, before another Dig brings it down. Next up is Magneton, and just to be safe, I switch Kent out for Eliwood, who ends up confused from a Supersonic as she comes in. She also gets paralyzed from a Thunder Wave, but a held Cherry Berry clears it up right away. She then manages to fight Confusion to land a Flame Charge and boost her speed, letting her outspeed on the next turn. But then she ends up hitting herself in Confusion and gets paralyzed again. With no more Cherry Berries to heal, I have to switch, this time to Rebecca. She resists a Shockwave coming in. Then after Magneton misses its next Supersonic, a Fire Spin is enough to take it out. That just leaves Flaffy, but besides another Thunder Wave, there's not much it can really do before a couple Giga Drains take it down, winning us our third badge. With the new level cap, Lynn can evolve into Poliwhirl, then with the Water Stone I bought in Slateport City, I have her immediately evolve into Poliwrath, who as it turns out has been given a modest but noticeable buff to her attack. Then with a Metal Coat you can now find in the west side of Rust Turf Tunnel, Carol can evolve into Scizor. We then make our way around the northern loop of West Hoenn, and find ourselves a slew of encounters. Jafar the Houndour on Route 112, Canis the Coughing in the Fiery Path, Sane the Ponyta on Route 113, Fiora the Lotad on Route 114, then Pent the Clefairy on a new patch of grass on Route 115. We then make our way up to Mount Chimney to stop Maxie and Team Magma from reenacting the Mount St. Helens disaster, but the recent additions to the team ends up making this fight barely an inconvenience. Since Maxie's Mightyena doesn't have Intimidate here, a couple Karate Chops from Matthew easily takes it down. Then Lynn can come in and wipe the floor of his Gligar and Ace Camerupt with a couple Bubble Beams each. Easy peasy. But on our way down the Jagged Pass, I end up running into a Murkrow, but even after bringing it into the red and paralyzing it, it just does not want to be caught. And since I hadn't stocked up on Pokeballs recently, I actually ended up running out. So unfortunately, I have to miss out on this encounter. I even had the perfect name for him. It's disappointing, but it's not like losing out on a potential Honchkrow is a huge setback, because, as you might have expected, our next gym battle against Flannery and her fire types ends up being a breeze, all thanks to Lynn the Poliwrath. Even going off of her lower special attack, all she needs to do is spam Bubble Beam, and with some lucky flinches thanks to her held King's Rock, she manages to survive and completely sweep her entire team, earning us a very easy 4th gym badge. Before heading back to Petalburg City, I make a pit stop in the desert on Route 111 to pick up Limstella the Ball Toy, then Carla the Sandshrew in the Mirage Tower. I also go ahead and pick up the Root Fossil to get myself a Lileep, but as it turns out, after it's revived, its location ends up being Rustboro City. Since I picked up Guy here earlier, Oswin the Lileep is officially not usable. Bummer. At the very least, Priscilla can finally evolve into Ampharos, then we can officially return to take on our absent father to get our 5th gym badge. I have Eliwood open the fight with a Flame Charge to boost her speed, but she immediately gets confused from Spinda's Teeter Dance. He fights through at first to take it out with a critical hit double kick, but then Norman's Ace Slacking takes the field. I don't want Eliwood to risk opening herself up to a massive hit, so I switch over to Carol as Slacking loafs around. It then goes for a Yawn on the next turn, while a Steel Wing barely does a 4th. So on Slacking's next Truant turn, I have Carol U-turn out to avoid falling asleep, while bringing Eliwood back in. I taught her Protect just for this fight, and now we're in the best position to take him out. A double kick brings him below half and triggers a Citrus Berry, then another double kick brings him into the red, forcing Norman to use his Hyper Potion. But then I'm reminded that taking a turn to heal doesn't interfere with the Truant turns, meaning I end up wasting a turn having Eliwood Protect for no reason. So I feel like I have no choice but to risk going for a double Protect, and it obviously fails, meaning Slacking can finally connect with the Yawn. It's a little annoying, but with Slacking's Truant, this gives me the excuse to switch back to Carol, who after getting yawned as well, can simply U-turn out again to get us back on track. This time I decide to bring in Lynn, who also gets yawned, but at this point, a single submission is enough to finally take it down. With Norman's biggest threat finally out of the way, Lynn ends up facing off against her cousin Politoed, who is apparently part normal type now. We end up exchanging body slams, but Lynn's is the one that ends up getting the paralysis. But she does end up falling asleep thanks to the previous yawn, so I switch to Priscilla, who could decently tank a powered up facade coming in. Politoed is revealed to be holding a Quick Claw, so she's guaranteed to land the first hit on the next turn, but a super effective Volt Switch quickly puts a stop to it. I bring in Carol to take on Norman's Vigoroth, who even with a normal gem boosted slash can only manage to deal 11 points of damage. With that, Carol is safe to go for a few Steel Wings after Norman uses his last Hyper Potion, then goes for a Bullet Punch to land the final blow, winning us our 5th gym badge. And judging my dad's reaction, I'm not sure I'm gonna get any dinner tonight. With that win, we unlock some new useful items to buy from the newly implemented shops right outside the gym, one of which is the Ability Capsule, which will let me switch Carol and Matthew's abilities to the much more useful Technician, helping to boost their lower powered moves to respectable levels. Next, I return to Meteor Falls to grab an encounter I missed, then I end up talking to a random Aqua Grunt who selflessly hands me a free egg. After grabbing a few more encounters, including Sonia the Giraffarig on Route 119, I take some time to hatch my new egg in Mauville City, which ends up being a Tinkatink. I name her Vida, quickly evolve her into Tinkatuff, and add her to the team. Both Sonia and Vida help out in clearing Team Aqua from the Weather Institute, and for our efforts I'm given a free cast form who I name Louise. But her meeting location ends up being the same as Sonia's, so she is unfortunately a no-go. After another easy fight against May, Sonia learns Twin Beam, allowing her to evolve into her Gen 9 evolution for Ridgiraff. Then after fishing up Ursula the Carvana in Fortree City, we can then finally take on Winona and her flying types. Naturally, I open with Priscilla to make use of the type advantage, but Winona's Fearow has other plans since it actually knows Drill Run. But lucky for us, it doesn't do too much damage, so a single Thunderbolt easily takes it out. Next is Tropius, who Priscilla can only hit neutrally, so I have her Volt switch over to Carol. Tropius just sets up the sun, then a Technician boosted wing attack is more than enough to take it down on the following turn. Next up is Skarmory, who manages to outspeed thanks to a Quick Claw and connect with an Aerial Ace before Carol can U-turn out. I bring Priscilla back in, and after being brought down to half thanks to a Fury attack, another Thunderbolt takes him down. Next is Pelipper, who connects with a Supersonic that causes Priscilla to hit herself, which activates her held Citrus Berry. But after a Water Pulse brings her back down to half HP, she manages to fight through and connect with a quad-effective Thunderbolt, leaving us Winona's ace Altaria to deal with. I foolishly switch to Kent, as Altaria begins boosting its attack and speed with a couple Dragon Dances. Then I discover that Altaria is now part Fairy type after a Breaking Swipe fails. Not good. With Altaria now at +3 attack and speed, I desperately switch to Pent, as Altaria goes for another Dragon Dance. There's a chance I might have massively screwed myself over. So Altaria goes for a 5th Dragon Dance, and a Dazzling Gleam ends up hitting just over half, which activates its held Citrus Berry. And thanks to that, Altaria can safely go for a 6th and final Dragon Dance. And so after another Dazzling Gleam brings Altaria down to the red, Winona uses her Hyper Potion to heal her back up. Another Dazzling Gleam brings her back to half, but now we're facing off against an Altaria with maxed out speed and attack. But at this point, I have to keep Pent in, so I expect to lose him here. Oh, well that's a bit underwhelming. Good job, Pent, you did it. So, after a dominating win to earn our 6th badge, Elowood can finally evolve to Blaziken, and we get another slew of encounters as we make our way through some story beats. First I catch Nino the Xatu on Route 120, then Effidel the Shuppet on Route 121. And then after getting caught up in a glitch trap in the Safari Zone, I managed to find a Larvitar who I name Wrath. By the way, I hadn't saved in a while, and I seriously thought I was going to lose so much progress here until I somehow found a way out. Then at the peak of Mount Pyre, I find Layla the Absol, then Wallace the Geodude in the Magma Hideout. And after another fairly easy fight against Maxie, Vida fully evolves into Tinkaton. We then clear out the Team Aqua hideout, allowing us to finally hit the seas and make our way to the next gym. On Route 124, I catch a Seadra who I name Heath, and he happens to come with his own personal dragon scale. With that, he can immediately evolve into Kingdra, who happen to get some decent buffs to his stats and move pool here, so he obviously earns a spot on the team. We then arrive in Moss Deep City, and after catching Legalt the Roselia in a new patch of grass, we can finally take on the double battle against Tate and Liza's psychic types. I open the fight with Heath and Layla, taking on their Claydol and Mismagius. Well, that's cool. Mismagius must have been given the psychic type here. That means Layla's Night Slash can hit her quite effectively and... Oh, silly me. Of course Mismagius doesn't have the psychic type for the psychic type gym. She actually gets the fairy type. I really should have accounted for that. So thanks to that incorrect assumption, Miss Magius ends up giving me my first death of the run, which, funny enough, is pretty fitting considering her namesake. I send out Vida to take her place, then after a Surf from Heath deals significant damage to everyone, an Earthquake from Claydol does enough damage to activate her Citrus Berry. Then as I go for a fake out against Claydol, Tate and Liza heal up Miss Magius, then another Surf ends up taking Claydol down while leaving Vida in the red. I switch her out for Carol as I continue my risky Surf strategy while Lunatone sets up a light screen. A Bullet Punch on the next turn finally takes Miss Magius down, then we're left with their two final Pokemon. A Dark Pulse doesn't do enough damage thanks to the light screen, as Lunatone connects with a Hypnosis to put Carol asleep. I switch him out for Sonia, our next team member to selflessly take another Surf that ends up taking Lunatone down. That just leaves Solrock, so even after healing with a Citrus Berry, Heath and Sonia can double team with a Dark Pulse and Crunch, taking it down, and winning us our 7th gym badge, at the cost of my very first loss of the run. So after saying goodbye to Layla, then catching another couple of encounters, we have to face off against Maxie at the Moss Deep Space Center. But what I didn't expect was this to be a pure one-on-one double battle against a whole team without Steven's help. So it's all up to my team to take on Maxie's full team of 6. I open with Sonia and Lynn taking on his Gliscor and Crobat. A Leech Life hits Sonia super effectively, while a Bubble Beam from Lynn deals about half to Gliscor. A Twin Beam isn't enough to take down Crobat, while my team ends up getting their speed lowered from a Bulldoze. Sonia's also brought below half, so I switch to Heath, who shrugs off Crobat's Venoshock coming in. But after another Bulldoze continues to lower our speed, I make a risky move by trying to go for Hypnosis, which misses. Not a surprise. Maxie's team now completely outspeeds mine, and after another Venoshock and Bulldoze bring Lynn into the red, I take another huge risk by having Heath go for a Surf. And it ends up paying off as Lynn manages to hold on by a sliver, while Crobat and Gliscor finally go down. But we're obviously not out of the woods yet. Ursaluna and Shiftry come out next, but since my turn isn't over yet, Lynn is able to land a Body Slam that ends up paralyzing Ursaluna. With that, I have Matthew take Lynn's place, then after an Aura Sphere hits Shiftry for some decent damage. So the paralysis turned out to not be a good thing. Thanks to powering up Facade, Heath unfortunately goes down. Ellawood takes his place, and together with Matthew, they manage to take Ursaluna down before it can do any more damage. Shiftry then manages to hit Ellawood for over half with a Floaty Fall, activating his held Citrus Berry. Dodrio comes in next, and fearing a strong ground-type attack, I decide to have Matthew go for a Tickle. This turns out to be the correct move, as it ends up saving Ellawood from a super effective high horsepower, allowing her to take Shiftry out next. At this point, I've had enough of these close calls, but thankfully we're almost done. His Ace Camerupt comes out last, and since my team is pretty worn down, I have no choice but to risk bringing in Priscilla. Matthew's double hit takes care of Dodrio, and then Camerupt goes for a Body Slam against her, and ends up getting paralyzed as a result. That means one more double hit and a Dragon Pulse can take Camerupt down on the following turn, giving us our most difficult win of the run so far. But things aren't slowing down just yet. We now have to make our way to the Sealed Cavern, while grabbing a few more encounters along the way, in order to face off against Archie, who thankfully isn't a double battle, nor does he have a full team of 6. His Wailord naturally goes down to a single Thunderbolt, then after Priscilla Volt switches out against Breloom, Rebecca can roast it with a Torch Song. Vida comes in next and somehow outspeeds Archie's Ace Sharpedo to take it down with a single Spirit Break, then Carol can resist pretty much anything Crobat does, and take it down after a few Bullet Punches. After that, Groudon and Kyogre start their usual bullcrap, and it's apparently our job to stop their bickering. Well, I say screw that, and make my way to the Sky Pillar to tattle on them to Rayquaza. While we're there, Kent can finally evolve into Flygon, then after catching Denning the Claydol, we can return to Setopolis and witness Groudon and Kyogre finally getting the timeout they deserve. With that crisis averted, we can finally take on the final gym battle against Juan and his water types. His Starmie starts off by immediately flinching Priscilla with an extra sensory, but manages to go down to a single Thunderbolt on the following turn. But after being brought to half health, I feel it's safer to switch her out for Matthew to take on Octillery. A double hit brings it down below half, and manages to flinch thanks to his held King's Rock, giving him the opportunity to get the KO on the next turn without taking any damage. His Kingdra gets hit with another strong double hit, but then a Water Pulse manages to confuse while taking him down below half. I switch to Pent, who tanks another Water Pulse, and thankfully doesn't get confused, but then Kingdra goes for an Ice Beam, and it also happens to be holding an Ice Gem to boost its power. But Pent manages to survive, heal up with a Citrus Berry, then hit back with a Moonblast to take it down. Whiscash is next, so I take a turn to heal with Moonlight as it sets up the rain with Rain Dance. A Moonblast just barely doesn't do half, and since Whiscash boosts its special defense with Amnesia, I know going for another won't do much help. I assume it knows Earthquake, so I decide to set up a Reflect before switching to Rebecca. It just keeps going for Amnesia until it's maxed out, and I have Rebecca set up the Sun with the Sunny Day, which completely neuters its Water Pulse. A quad-effective Giga Drain just barely misses out on the KO, so Whiscash is able to bring back the rain, and gets healed up with a Hyper Potion. But even after our Reflect ends, an Earthquake doesn't end up doing much, so with one more Giga Drain and Petal Dance, Whiscash goes down. That just leaves Celio, and after a Water Pulse-induced confusion causes Rebecca to hit herself, I switch to Lynn, who can land a Brick Break on the next turn, that nets us a one-hit KO, winning us our 8th and final gym badge. With that, we have all 8 badges in hand, but before we can continue, I have to head back to Pacific Town to play and win the new Scuba Safari game in order to get the Waterfall HM. I passed over playing it the last time I was here since I wasn't sure if the Pokemon I would catch would count as the same location or not, and I was more interested in finding something in the new grass patch. So I go ahead and catch Hector the Mantike, and as I expected, his location is Pacific Town, the same as Carol. So I was right, but at the very least, Hector helps us win the Waterfall HM, meaning we can finally make our way to Victory Road on the way to the Pokemon League. Once we're there, I go ahead and grab our final encounter of the run, a Kirlia who I named Ninian. She can immediately evolve into Gardevoir, and since I'm considering what my final team will be at this point, I make the decision to add her as a late addition, mainly to help diversify my team's type makeup. After that, we have to take on Wally for the last time, but his team is kind of a joke compared to mine at this point. Ninian begins her battle debut by taking down his Altaria with a couple Ice Beams, Elwood roasts his Roserade with a Blaze Kick, a single Bullet Punch from Carol takes care of his own Gardevoir, Kent takes down Magnezone with an Earthquake, and then Delcatty does what Delcatty does best. After that, we've arrived at the Pokemon League, and my team's performance against Wally has me pretty confident that we can make it through the Elite Four Gauntlet without too many issues, barring a few remaining surprises. So after some last-minute adjustments, I stick with the team that made its way through Victory Road. Let's see if they have what it takes to end this run strong. First up on the chopping block is Sidney and his Dark types. He starts with Mightyena, who predictably goes down to a single Brick Break from Lynn. Then for Honchkrow, I switch over to Priscilla as it starts increasing its evasion with Double Team. A second Double Team causes Priscilla to miss her initial Thunderbolt, but after a third Double Team she manages to get lucky, giving us another one-hit KO. Next up is Crawdaunt, and I have Priscilla Volt switch out while netting us another easy KO. This lets me bring in Elwood for free, who easily takes down Sidney's last 2 Pokemon, giving us our first win without breaking a sweat. Next up is Phoebe and her Ghost types, and I start with Carol setting up with Swords Dance, while her Dusclops confuses him with a Confuse Ray. But he manages to fight through confusion on the next turn to take it down with a single Technician-boosted Thief. Dusknoir is next, and I have a feeling it's packing a Fire-type move, which would be devastating for Carol, so I pivot over to Elwood just to be safe. And I end up being right, as it ends up going for a Raging Fury. A Blaze Kick connects and activates its Citrus Berry, while Dusknoir finishes its second hit before ending up confused. Another Blaze Kick leaves it in the red, but Dusknoir manages to fight the confusion and land a strong super effective Earthquake. But Elwood hangs on at 31 HP, allowing her to take Dusknoir down on the following turn. For Frostlass, I just need to switch back to Carol, who can easily tank a Shadow Ball, then take her out with a single priority Bullet Punch. After that is Miss Magius, and this time around I know exactly what to expect. I assume it knows a Fire-type move as well, but now that I know it's part Fairy-type, I decide to risk keeping Carol in to land another Bullet Punch, which thankfully ends up giving us another one-hit KO. That just leaves Banette, but at this point there's not much he can do to us. I switch to Kent, and all he needs to do is land a Dragon Darts, taking it down and giving us our second Elite Four victory. Glacia and her Ice types are up next, and in this version she opens with a Dugong, who ends up being a bit bulkier than I expected, as even a super effective Thunderbolt from Priscilla doesn't even manage to hit for over half. It sets up Hail, and along with an Ice Beam, manages to bring Priscilla down to about a third of her HP, before a couple more Thunderbolts can take it out. Next is Glaceon, and after some more Hail Chip, I switch to Lynn, who despite getting her attack lowered due to a couple Chilling Waters, can still manage to take it down with a couple Brick Breaks, before needing to switch out as Glalie comes in next. He comes in on a weak Ice Beam, but ends up getting frozen. Not only that, this Glalie has the Moody ability, meaning its stats will end up all over the place if I can't take it out quickly. I go ahead and risk keeping Carol in, but lucky for me, he immediately defrosts and connects with a super effective priority Bullet Punch. But thanks to its previous defense boost, it only manages to do about a third. But since Glalie isn't doing any meaningful damage yet, I decide to stick to the plan. Another Bullet Punch causes Glacia to use a full restore, then a couple more brings Glalie back into the red. But after its attack ends up getting a high enough boost, it decides to go for a Crunch, which is a big mistake, because I have Carol holding a Rocky Helmet, which does just enough damage for Glalie to take itself out before its Moody boosts become a bit too much to handle. Next up is Walrein, so I switch to Lynn to soak up a Surf, then hit back with a Brick Break for the clean one-hit KO. That finally leaves us with Cloyster, so I use Hypnosis to put it to sleep, then switch to Priscilla. Of course, Cloyster immediately wakes up, but only to set up the Hail. It then connects with a Hydro Pump that would have taken Priscilla out if it got the critical hit, but she manages to hold on and take it out with a final Volt Switch, giving us our third Elite Four win. Last up is Drake, starting with his Kingdra, who ends up missing an initial Hydro Pump, giving Priscilla the opportunity to land a Choice Specs boosted Dragon Pulse that just barely misses out on the one-hit KO. At the very least, we end up forcing Drake to use up all of his full restores, before another Dragon Pulse manages to get the kill with a critical hit. Next up is Drake's own Flygon, so I decide to go for the Mirror Match to dodge an incoming Earthquake, then a single Dragon Darts manages to take our Doppelganger down easy. For Altaria, I decide to finally give Ninian some action. It tries to set up with a couple Dragon Dances, but much like before, it doesn't amount to much, as a boosted Aerial Ace once again barely does any damage before a Moonblast and Ice Beam take it down. Ninian also manages to take his Ace Elements down with a quad effective Ice Beam after surviving a Flamethrower, and like that we're already left with his final Pokemon, a Steelix for some reason. So Kent comes back in to dodge another Earthquake, before a couple Earthquakes of his own take it down, giving us our final Elite Four victory. And with that, we're down to the final fight against the champion Wallace. Besides a few surprises along the way, we've managed to make it this far without too many issues, so let's see if we can finish this run strong. Wallace starts with his Wailord, who outspeeds Priscilla and sets up the rain, but ends up going down easy to a single Specs Choice boosted Thunderbolt. That might have been a bit overkill, but it does give us a strong start. He sends out his Ace Milotic next, who can hit hard with a rain boosted Surf, but another Thunderbolt manages to get us another one-hit KO. At this point, another Thunderbolt could easily take out his Gyarados, but I'm not confident Priscilla could survive another hit, so I decide to switch to Kent. This ends up being the correct move as it goes for an Earthquake, which would have easily taken Priscilla out had she stayed in. A Dragon Darts puts Gyarados in the red as it starts boosting with Dragon Dance, forcing Wallace to use his first full restore. Then another Dragon Darts brings it back down, causing him to use another. We then repeat this 2 more times after that, and when Wallace finally runs out of full restores, instead of going for a physical move off of his boosted attack, it for some reason goes for a weaker Hyper Beam that Kent can easily shrug off. A final Dragon Darts takes Gyarados down, and then Ludicolo comes out next. I decide to switch to Elowood, and while it's definitely not the smartest move, at this point in the fight I might as well go for some style points. Ludicolo sets up a Leech Seed as Elowood comes in, then a Blaze Kick just barely doesn't get the KO. That means that after a Surf and Leech Seed damage, Elowood is down to just 6 HP. A second Blaze Kick can knock out Ludicolo, but as Tentacruel comes out, another hit of Leech Seed damage is more than enough to finish off Elowood. My starter goes down in a Blaze Kick of Glory right at the very end, which is how I imagine she would have wanted it. At least I hope so. So I bring in Ninian to get poisoned by a Toxic, then she just barely misses out on another one-hit KO with the Psychic. But with her amazing special defense, she can shrug off a super effective Sludge Bomb and take Tentacruel down on the next turn. And that just leaves Whiscash as Wallace's final Pokemon of all things. I pivot to Lyn as it just goes for a couple pointless Amnesias, then after a Limp Earthquake and a few Waterfalls, Whiscash falls. Wallace is defeated, and with that, I have officially completed a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Emerald Seaglass. Besides a few surprise deaths here and there, I would definitely say that this run was a bit on the easier side. Regardless, it was pretty fun experiencing Pokemon Emerald in a new and interesting way. The various changes and additions given to so many Pokemon who have been often considered neglected in the main games really helped create a unique and rewarding experience. I can definitely see myself playing through Emerald Seaglass again in the future, perhaps with some more restrictions to help pump up the difficulty a bit. It does come with a harder difficulty setting, so I'll have to check it out sometime. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing another Seaglass playthrough in the future. And as usual, please don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe to the channel as well. I always appreciate reading the comments and seeing your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.